Good evening. My name is Brett Vernon. I'm one of the board members for the Layton Rock Metropolitan District. Also got Scott Plummer here, one of my fellow board members. Katie Call is here, our operations coordinator and district staff. And we're here tonight to talk to you guys about the bond refinance that we just went through, let you know a little bit about some of the background of how we got where we are. And then I'll kind of walk through what our debt structure was, what our debt structure is going to be, what it means for us as a community, and then I'll open it up for questions. Does that sound good, or does anybody have a quick question before I start? I think I'll be able to get through my presentation in half hour, 45 minutes, something like that. Okay, I'm just going to launch. Let me share my screen here. And share. Great. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. This is just as a way of a background. Metropolitan districts are formed basically to construct neighborhoods. Cities no longer have the tax basis to be able to build neighborhoods on their own. So developers are able to issue debt, which is subsequently taken up by bond debt to build out a neighborhood. And those improvements that they build include streets, streetlights, sewers, sidewalks, landscaping, all that kind of stuff. All that's financed by the developer with bank debt at first. Then eventually, as those build up, he refinances those with bonds. And that bond financing is tax advantageous to the purchaser. But the cost for all those improvements are certified. There are state laws that require that those costs are reviewed and approved by an independent third party. So he can't just submit invoices for anything. The repayment of those bonds, or the bonds that the developer issues to build out a community, are generally issued throughout the building cycle. It takes 6, 7, 8 years to build out a neighborhood, and no developer that I know of can carry that amount of debt that long. So he gets repaid as the process is going along through bond proceeds. Those bonds are repaid ultimately by our property taxes on our property tax statement. Let's go to the next one. So our debt structure before the refinance was established in 2016 and 2017. The neighborhood was roughly half built out at the time. The property tax base was less than half of what it is now. So we had an unusual structure that really isn't advantageous to the community or to the residents for what that bond structure would be. We had senior debt, which is the amount of debt that the community was able to repay through its existing property tax base in 2016. Again, half of what it is now, maybe even less. Then subordinated debt that he was able to sell out on the market that didn't have any payments that were going to come due until payments on the senior debt started to come down. And then there was a developer advance, and that developer advance is funds that were owed to the developer, certified costs that that couldn't be repaid through bond issuance. There just wasn't any debt capacity left for either senior debt or subordinated debt at that case. So kind of a weird debt structure, especially if you're used to just a normal mortgage on your house. So what we were facing when we started looking at this, when Scott, Tim, and I started going through this, is we had our senior bonds, which were issued in 2016. They're called the A bonds, and there was about $35.7 million worth of principal interest. Worth of principal. And those bonds were earning interest between 4 and 5%. They're serial bonds. They have a whole bunch of different maturities. They ladder upon themselves. It's a little bit different than a mortgage, but they have different maturities. That's why you see not just one interest rate, but a couple interest rates. The average annual payment on these bonds was about $1,800 per residence in 2020. That's what your average house is paying. Some are paying more, some are paying a little bit less, but that's just for the debt burden side of things. One thing that I'll come back to that. We had two series of subordinated bonds. We had our 2016 Series B bonds that had a balance of 5.6 million. They were accruing interest at 7.25%, but we weren't making any payments on those bonds at all. They were simply accruing interest, and interest was building. Unpaid interest was building on those notes every year at the rate of 7.25%. Now, eventually, we would have to start paying on those, and we actually had it in our budget to make some payments on them in 2021. That was reversed after we went through our bond refinance. But using a 30-year amortization, the payments on those bonds would have been $318 per residence, and but that excludes the deferred interest that was due. Now, that payment wouldn't have come on all at once. It would have layered in over time. So that number isn't real accurate, but it's a good metric to understand what we were facing if we hadn't gone through the refinance process. Then we also had more subordinated debt. We had $4.1 million worth of C series bonds that were issued in 2017. That was a year after the B series bonds were issued. They had a balance of 4.1 million, and they were accruing interest at 10.75%. We weren't making any payments on those. They were just building up interest, accrued interest every year. If we had gotten to the point where we needed to start making payments on those bonds, the payment would have been roughly $319 per resident. So, and I came up with that number simply by taking what's a 30-year amortization on that debt at that rate and divided it by the total number of houses, which is 1,440. Then we also had the developer advances. These are funds that weren't able to be refinanced through the earlier bond issuance. There was $5.5 million that we still owed the developer that was accruing interest at 8%. There were no payments were anticipated to be paid on that amount, but it was accruing interest, and it was going to become a liability to the district at some point in time. So that's where we were. So let me go down and go next to the so what. So here's the issues that we saw when we started looking at the existing debt that we had. On the debt that we were paying principal and interest on, we paid $500,000 worth towards principal in 2020. It's roughly $1.3 million worth of interest, only $500,000 of principal. Just like your mortgage in the beginning, you pay very little towards principal, most of it goes towards interest. The 2016 B bonds accrued interest $405,000 during the year. The 2017 C bonds accrued interest of $441,000 a year. And the developer advances another $440,000 a year. So we were going backwards. We generated $1.3 million worth of accrued interest on those subordinated notes, and we only paid our debt down by $500,000. So every year we're going backwards by about $800,000, or about $550 per house rough and tough. Total unpaid interest at the end of the year, and most of these numbers came from our CPA, by the way. Total unpaid interest was $5.5 million. And that was just going to keep growing if we didn't do anything about it. So over.
Hey, Scott,
Yes,
this is Bob Haycock. Excuse me for interrupting, but what was the total amount of debt we had before the refinancing?
Brett was a numbers guy. I'm sorry. I was the emotional support and
Scott was awesome. I would have lost my mind if he wasn't in the middle of all of this.
that was the problem child and brought up a lot of issues.
No, man, you were huge, Scott.
But maybe Brett can answer that question for you.
No problem. Let me go back a couple pages here. Actually, if I can go back to. So we had just principal, right? Is that what you're looking for, Bob? Just principal?
Right, just principal.
Okay. 35.7, 5.6, 4.1, and 5.5. And I was younger, I could do this in my head.
Yeah, me
35.7,
too.
5.6, 4.1, 5.5. 50.9 million.
$51 million.
51 million bucks. Now, if you're thinking sources and uses, how do we go from that money to this money? It's going to be kind of hard to do, so you have to stick with me a little bit, okay? Because the numbers aren't going to add up.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I just was interested in kind of where we were at that moment before we refinanced. And that answered the question. Thank you.
Oh, you betcha. Okay. So where did we end up now? We hired a financial advisor, North Slope, to guide us through the process. We used our existing legal team to help us structure these because they've done many of these bond refinances. And our overriding goal when we redid this debt was to end up with a very conservative and a very stable financial footprint when this is all done. I heard this over and over again from Tim and from Scott that we want to have a very stable debt structure. And I've heard that from other people in the neighborhood as well. So we ended up issuing $45.9 million worth of new debt that paid off our $50.9 million worth of debt, plus all our accrued interest. We did that by issuing our bonds at a premium. The rates on them were a little bit higher than what market rates are. Therefore, those bond investors give us more than the face value of the bonds. It generates cash to be able to issue less debt to retire more principal. This new debt is all senior debt. There is no more junior debt. There is no more unpaid interest. There is no more developer advance. The developer advance, well, let me stick on this and I'll come back to the developer advance. These are serial bonds again, and they have different maturities. One thing I want to touch on, the bonds we repaid, I verified this with our financial advisor team. None of those were owned by the developer. The only money that was due to the developer was the developer advance. All the rest of the bonds had been sold to the general public or to retirement funds or pensions or other type of investment hedge funds that invest in municipal securities. So our developer didn't get any of that accrued interest. Our new bonds have a coupon rate of 3 to 4%. That's the interest that we're paying on them. But because we sold them at a premium, and because we received more cash than the face value of the bonds, our effective yield is somewhere between 1.99 and 2.06%. I'm pretty happy with those numbers. Our timing was very good. We also did some key things to make sure that we worked those interest rates down. We got a rating from Moody's, and we worked very hard to make sure that that rating was strong. Uninsured, our rating was BA1, I do believe. Then we bought credit insurance to improve our rating to, I believe, AA1.
Yep.
So we invested to make sure that we drove down those interest costs as much as possible with a little bit of upfront cost to do that. Out of this, on top of being able to pay off $50 million worth of debt with $46 million worth of new debt, we received $7.9 million in cash out proceeds. We had to take some cash out proceeds to make this deal work. We owed our developer money on the from his developer advance. If we only refinanced our existing debt and cut property taxes as low as possible, the developer would be able to say that we were negotiating in bad faith because he received nothing of the developer advance that he was rightfully entitled to. So we had to have some money come out to be able to invest in the neighborhood and reach a settlement with our developer on the amount of the developer advance and the accrued interest that was due to him. I believe that was pretty close to all in about $8 million that we ended up owing him when we sat down at the table to try and work our way through that. The more money that we were able to work into projects throughout the neighborhood, the less money that we have to consider giving to the developer to settle his advance. If we invested no money in the neighborhood, all of that would have gone to the developer. So that's something that we sweated over quite a bit because we weren't sure we wanted to take out any cash. We're not sure that our residents would want us to do that. But given that it was either going to go to the developer or into the neighborhood, we chose the neighborhood. Sitting down with the developer, this is probably one of the toughest negotiations I've been through in my life. We settled the amount that we owed him for about a third of what the amount was due. It actually works out to be 36 cents on the dollar. It was difficult, but it was finalized. And some of those funds are currently in escrow as he's finishing up work throughout the neighborhood. One thing I do want to touch on, I think our developer is a straight up guy. He's done a good job in the neighborhood. Some of the improvements have taken a lot longer than we would have liked to have seen get done. Some of the repairs have taken longer. Some of the work towards on the west side of the community is not what we would like to see. But you hear a lot of stories about developers like this article in the Denver Post where you have developers who are running roughshod over their neighborhoods. I don't think we had that at all. But basically a pretty straight up guy, a pretty straightforward businessman. We have a lot of work.
I want to add one thing about that. The developer got emotional talking about this subdivision. He was very fond of it. I think it's his crowning jewel. And he wasn't out to get us. He wanted all the residents to have a good subdivision, and it showed. And this wasn't some normal build for him. So he wasn't just some East Coast developer coming in, and he cared a lot about the subdivision, and he still does. So I just wanted to add that, and anyway, so you can form an opinion about him.
Thanks, Scott. I agree with that completely. He called it his baby a few times. It's been very helpful for us when we've run into issues, and he still will be. He's offered to do that. So at the end of the day, after settling the developer advances and paying for the cost of the refinance, and I wish I had that number with me. I think all in it cost us about $400,000 to go through all this. I need to double check that math, so don't quote me on that. Got about $4.7 million sitting in a project fund to be able to spend on projects throughout the neighborhood. I'll touch on those in a subsequent slide. So even though we paid off a lot of debt that we weren't paying on at the time, we're still able to reduce the mill levy. The mill levy that was imposed for prior years was 44.5 mils. The debt restructure would allow us to be able to reduce that down by 7.5 mils to 37 mils. Okay, so what's a mill? Well, it works out to be 7.5 mils works out to be about $325 on a property with an assessed value of $600,000. That's actually my house. So, but that's where it came up with that $325 amount. The higher your assessed value, the higher that amount is. The lower your assessed value, the lower that amount is. All in, at the end of the day, the present value of the savings to the neighborhood works out to be about $32 million. So I think we came out of this good. We came out of it stable, which is important. Does anyone have any question on what the new debt structure is before I go into what does this mean for us? Okay. Either that's good or everyone's completely asleep. Not sure which. So like I said before, our primary goal was to make sure that we had a strong financial footprint and a strong financial future going forward. Our neighbor to the north, very large community on the other side of 72, they're currently hoping that they can go through something like this, but they aren't going to be in near as good a position as we are. And I don't know of any metro district. Scott, you may know more, but I don't know of any metro district that's going to be in the same financial position that we are at this point. Now, after we had closed, and we'd done a lot of meetings throughout the neighborhood talking to people about what we were doing, what we're thinking about doing.
And I'm sorry, Brett, I was muted. Yeah,
No.
I work with a lot of special districts for the city of Denver. That's kind of my thing. And we review end of year reports on them to how it affects value. And I haven't seen one as good as we are. We have a nice reserve. We have great interest rates now. And in my years, I haven't seen another subdivision of metro district as good as ours. So we should be very proud of the metro district we live in.
Awesome, thanks. That's really good to hear. After we had closed, our council indicated to us that we may be able to, instead of reducing the mill levy, we may be able to reduce the operations fee down to 0. So instead of cutting mortgage payments by 36 divided by 12, I should be able to do by about $30 a month, we might be able to take out the annual operations fee that comes out that's due at the end of every year. We went back and forth on this as a board. It was a difficult decision to make because we had described to residents that we were going to do one thing, and we turned around and we were considering doing something else, which is, you know, a concern for some people. So it wasn't a unanimous vote, but we decided to reduce the operations fee down to 0. The mill levy for operations is going to go up to offset that operations fee, and the mill levy for debt burden goes down. The net effect of those two is a flat tax, a flat mill levy for 2021 versus 2020. We just don't have the operations fee at this point in time. We do reserve the right to reinstate that if for some reason the district's in a position where it's facing a financial situation that we didn't anticipate. That may have to come back. We don't see that happening at this point in time. I can't imagine a scenario where that would happen, but we always reserve that right just in case. So we didn't eliminate it, we reduced it to 0. There's a big difference. It wasn't an easy decision, and the board members go through this stuff with a very fine-tooth comb, trying to figure out the right way to do things. So when I say that our property taxes didn't change, one thing that our mill levy is going to be unchanged at the end of the day. One thing we need to consider is we paid off all the subordinated bonds that had the potential to increase property taxes by about $640 per year per house, or an increase of about a third over what we're paying right now. That specter is gone. That's not going to happen. But that was out there, and that is something that we were facing. One thought is property taxes are currently deductible for individual income taxes until you reach that $10,000 cap, which an operations fee was not deductible. So this could generate a tax deduction, unless you're like me and you hit that $10,000 cap, then it doesn't do any good at all. One thing that the district we decided in our last board meeting, and we realized that we weren't doing, was we weren't funding a replacement reserve for capital assets. Our assets wear out. The pool is going to have to be replastered this year. We have fence repairs and fence restaining that we need to be doing. We have streets that are going to need replacement, concrete trails where ground movement is going to require repairs, and we weren't funding a replacement reserve for that. So we have a little bit less than $1 million, some money going into a replacement reserve fund now, so that we make sure that we don't have any surprise expenses, that we're funding those repairs before they actually need to be done. So I touched on earlier, now comes the fun part. I touched on earlier that we've got a project fund, $4.7 million, to be able to do things throughout the neighborhood. Scott, Tim, and I put our heads together, and we're still working our way through this. What do we need to do? What makes sense? And so I've summarized some of the thoughts that we are considering. We don't know if we can do all these. We don't know if how they would come together, but we think that they're really important to do. And most of the expenditures are going to happen more towards the west side of the community than the east. As you go from the east of the community over by Daybreak Park, transition west towards West Ridge Park, you can see the improvements and the landscaping starts to go downhill. And when you get to the hill in front of West Ridge Park, that's where it really collapses. So we're looking at doing improvements to all three entrances. To the Lynn Rock entrance, it doesn't need much. Lynn Rock entrance needs some, a little sprucing up. The Yule entrance will need more, but it only serves maybe 20% of the community, so we wouldn't put a ton of money there. But over half, is it over half or is it exactly half, Scott, of our residents come up Culebra? And that entrance is the weakest of the entire neighborhood. So we're going to be looking
It's a little less when you take the two entrances in account.
a little bit less than half,
Yeah.
but it's still, considering that it's the most used entrance, it's the worst looking.
And plus I want to add that it's the first entrance when you get coming from the west. And so when you're going east on 82nd, you come across this grandiose entrance that's very impressive. When you're coming from the west, you come across this temporary wood sign and curbs that are cracked out. It just doesn't fit what we want people to see when they start driving along our subdivision.
And I agree with that completely. And then when you turn up Culebra and you head straight up towards the hill that's right in front of West Ridge Park, you have that stairway to heaven there that goes straight up. That's right next to a hillside that just looks terrible. So we're going to take a look at that hillside and we're going to see what we can do to stabilize it. Scott, do you want to talk about some of these, because you're really involved in a lot of this?
Yeah, so like Brett said, I think we had 5 meetings. I think about something like that, and we had lots and lots of input from people. A big one that everyone wants was pickleball courts and tennis courts. We're going to try to find a place for a tennis court, but pickleball courts are small. We could probably have multiple locations, multiple pickleball courts where you might have one tennis court. So we're going to try to find that. I don't know if you've been to Ping Pong Park. Brett, do you know the intersection?
I believe it's Zircon and, no, it's not Zircon, 85th or 84th. It's just on the north side of the Jefferson Parkway.
Right. So the Ping Pong Park, it's been a great success. It was a lot that had nothing going on, and we made it into something great. And so we're going to do that, scattered out, just these end of cul-de-sacs and large corners that aren't doing anything. We're going to do little pocket parks underneath the power lines. Along 88th, the northwest corner of the subdivision was, like Brett said, was really neglected. Along 88th, I think there's 7 portions at the end of each block where the power lines go over. This year it doesn't look quite as bad because we had a great spring, but in the past it just looked like dirt tracks. So we're thinking about putting a playground up there, a gazebo, putting green, workout stations, improved landscaping, etc. We're going to do a bunch of beautification projects. I won't tell everybody, but we have artwork that's going to be coming around. It's not like Denver spending on artwork. It's not a fortune, but it's going to really jazz up the place. It's going to go with us being in a mine. A lot of people said they wanted benches. We're going to put more benches out. We might have a adopt a bench program if you want to have it customized or however color you want. Something that's important to me that a lot of support was a dog park location yet to be determined. A community garden underneath the big power lines that go north-south. I can't really say where it was, but it's it's right next to the ping pong park. It's long power lines. We're going to put a community garden there. We don't know any details yet. It's going to have water, either pump or tap. Another one people really like is we're thinking about putting a stairway from Westridge Park. It's going to go up the hill, so it's going to be like a workout park, stairs. And then it's going to meander and it's going to connect the upper portion down to Westridge. And so those people have a way to walk to a true park. For the lap swimmers out there, we're going to get new laps, lanes. We're hoping to put maybe possibly a better Wi-Fi for the pool, an AV system, so we could have online and in-person meetings. That's about it.
We talked about more shade at the pool. If we
Yeah,
could-
more shade of the pool. You know, a lot of things were thrown out like a splash pad, but those are very expensive and very hard to maintain. We got lots of ideas from people, some super expensive and some are cheap, and we're going to try to incorporate them. But we met with a lot of people, we got a lot of it, and these actually are kind of the most mentioned things from people. And we feel pretty confident from talking to them that I think this is what people will be happy with.
I agree with you, Scott. And you did a really good job of detailing this list when you sent it out to Ben a couple days ago. Thank you. So this is what we're looking at. We're using tax exempt bond proceeds, and we have a pretty narrow window to be able to do this. So we have to spend this $4.7 million in 36 months. And that's 36 months from October 19th. So we are getting going on trying to find the right construction build firm to help us put this thing together. We've got a meeting set up on Monday to walk the neighborhood with.
I'll add one thing, I'll interrupt, but a lot of the land we want to work with is the city. It's all park land. Where the stairs is going to be is actually all Arvada Park. Where we want to put pickleballs is all on city park. So I'm hoping to have a master plan where we could submit to the city by the end of January, because we know cities are slow. There's a lot of red tape, and so we want to get that going as soon as possible, because they do seem open to letting us utilize their parks for community events. But we need to stress that if it's on a city park, anybody can use it. So if anybody wants to have a birthday party at a pickleball court and use them, that's the way it is. We can't have private on public parks.
Okay, so that's kind of a synopsis of where we were at, what we did, and what we think that's going to do for us. So I'm going to quit sharing my screen. And I'd love to get some questions from you guys and understand what your thoughts are. We're going to have a lot of conversations about the improvements. So please feel free to unmute yourself. And do you have any questions?
Hey, Brett, this is Bob Haycock. Hey, I just want to first of all say, you guys did great work, man. This is
Hi,
really
this is
impressive.
Pam. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Pam.
Now I can't hear you. Let me figure. Okay, can you hear me now?
Pam,
Okay, I got everybody.
we have Bob Haycock talking right now. Can we?
I'm sorry.
finish you just a little bit?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, all I want to do is just for at least Robin and I want to thank you guys. You guys did really good work, and we should all really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate that. It was a lot of work.
Yeah.
Hi, Pam.
Okay. And kind of echoing Bob's thought, I'm not an expert on any of this, but I know I was following the part about bonds, and so much of it was a deferred obligation. So hats off to you guys for getting rid of that with an awesome interest rate on top of it. So, because that would have been horrible hanging over our head for years and years. And my other question is, I loved hearing about all the improvements. If we have other suggestions, is there somewhere I can email those?
I will, Katie, can you just, I don't know, I can give my email address right now if you want.
Okay.
You all ready to write it down?
Yep.
It's Mulligan, Mulligan, plumber, PLUMMER @gmail.com.
Okay,
And I'm serious when I say any suggestion is a good suggestion. It may work out, may not work out. It's all about money. But we will take any suggestion.
no, that's cool. Thank you. I can't believe how much work went into this, so thank you again.
And Pam, feel free to email me as well. Scott and I talk all the time, so we'll share, but my email address is brett.vernon, B as in boy, RETT, .vernon, V as in Victor, ERNON, at SBC, that's Sam Boy Charles Global .net.
And I just put those into the chat for everyone to make note of as well.
Oh,
Thanks.
thank you.
Or you can always reach out to Katie and Ben, and they'll get it all put together as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love
Thanks.
to hear what you think. We're looking for ideas. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi. Hi, team. This is Sean Connors. Hey, great work. Impressive. Best meeting I've been in all day today. Quick question I have.
Actually, I'm going to double that. This is Sarah Connors. Thank you again. We really appreciate it.
So all the improvements to the West End, love to hear that. We live right across from the park. We face the park. We look at those dead trees all the time. I know that has to negotiate with the city, right? So how does that work with all these improvements?
The ones along in between the sidewalk and the, those are city responsibility. Along the park, and it ends when the houses start. The developer's been taking care of those, but I think those are all city land. Now, right now, the hill is still the city's responsibility, but not for much longer. And I will speak for anybody that lives on the west side. The West Ridge Hill should be a focal point when you come in up to Culebra. It should be beautiful. It should be a welcoming sign when we drive up. And that's our goal. So we're going to try to have trees. We're going to have maybe tiered hardscape to work with the grain. It's just going to look, I'm hoping it's going to look beautiful, and we don't have to spend a fortune on it.
Yeah, boulders and all that kind of good stuff. And I completely agree with Scott. That's an area that can make or break this neighborhood. So it's very much a big deal. You know, you touched on trees, and trees are a big challenge for us. We plant them, we pay for them, they die. I hate that.
Yeah.
So at one point, and Katie, maybe you can help me out with this a little. We commissioned a study from an arborist to help us understand what's going on with our trees and what kind of trees we needed to plant. Do you know if we've heard back from them at all?
Yes, it was sent back a couple months ago, so I can resurface that report.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to understand what that says, because we've got a moratorium at this point on tree planting until we can figure out how to make them live.
Absolutely, I'll resend that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We appreciate the work that you guys are doing. We really do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
One more comment about the park. It's not going to be just the hill. You walk up each pathway. Either sides of the pathways are a mess. There's too much dirt. There's too much ugliness. They need to be covered. And so West Ridge Park is going to be a jewel. It's my thing. And it's going to happen. So it's going to look a lot better. But again, we Mother Nature, we know it's going to take years for grass to plant, bushes to become bigger. So we have to be patient, but we hope it'll look a lot better.
Yeah,
Wonderful. Great.
we like to hear that. We really enjoy living here. And, you know, it's nice to hear that the work is going to go into the park and everything. So thank
Yeah.
you. Really appreciate
I live really close to it, so it's near and dear to me.
that.
And to touch on something kind of quickly, and I see Chris is ready to jump in. We've met with the Parks Department several times, and City of Arvada Parks is extremely supportive of what we're trying to do. There's a lot of red tape involved, but they're very encouraging. They're going to help us with the planning process. we just have a lot of support from the Parks Department all the way up to the city manager. So we're very, very optimistic that we can make some real impacts up there. Hey, Chris.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I just wanted to join the chorus of appreciation. That's it's always a nice thing when you can pile on in a good way. So thank you guys for what you did. This is awesome. And it strikes me how few residents again are here and how few will really fully appreciate and understand the magnitude of this, but I do. So thank you. I did have a quick question. Can any of the monies be spent in addition to the capital improvements you've been discussing? Can any of the monies be also spent on things like community programs or things like that? Or does this all have to be put into actual like hardscapes and things?
My understanding is it's all infrastructure.
Okay.
Is
No,
that your understanding, Scott?
Yeah, you can't do anything existing, like you can't say we're gonna throw $50,000 more at the activities lifestyle fund to
Okay.
have a great couple years. It's gotta be pretty much visible, I guess you could say.
Okay.
And we can't
Fair.
use it for ongoing maintenance like the pool replaster that we have to do.
Mhm.
That's going to cost us about $65,000. Taking care of the pool is a real priority for us, but because it's an existing asset, we can't use the new bond proceeds to be able to improve that. So it all has to go into new stuff.
I want
Gotcha.
to add one more before we lose everything. This May, we're getting a new board. We're gonna get 3 brand new members. And so this list that Brett and I tirelessly put together, the new board may not like it. So Brett and I are not promising anything. We hope we can get what we want because we've done a lot of work on this and it's a big deal for us, but the new board is going to be an unknown and it might all change. So keep that in the back of your minds.
And I will do my best to draft new board members. Chris,
Don't look at me.
I will do my best to try and draft new board members that to help us out because it has been a lot of work. But yeah, we'd love to get some new perspectives on the board, and especially women. Right now it's all guys, and I don't think it just doesn't work well that way. We definitely need some women on the board to help guide us through this.
And it's really not that time consuming with the refinance. It was awful. Brett and I were burnt out, but
yeah,
from moving on, it's really not that much. It really isn't. And sounds like Sarah, that's the perfect thing for you.
I was
She can't
just thinking her-
She can't speak in her defense. I think that's a yes.
You sound passionate. That's the only reason I said it.
but we will be talking to the community a lot more and reaching out to the community a lot more about the improvements and to nearby neighbors about specific improvements. People are going to be real near pocket parks. We're going to get their ideas and their insights on what they want to see, what they'd like to see, outside their front door. So we'll keep going with that. Any questions, anyone? We did
No, I
this.
think this was a nicely done presentation too, guys.
thank
Way
you,
to
Brett.
boil it down, but was a complicated process.
Well, we got it done in less than an hour. That's
Yeah, exactly.
that's pretty good. That's pretty good for us. All right. Hey, thanks everyone. We hope to see you at our next board meeting. Is that in February, Scott, or we got one in January?
I think February 15th.
Okay. Well, as always, Katie and Ben are great at getting the information out. If you haven't stopped by the clubhouse to meet these guys, we're so impressed by our team, and there's Flynn. But if you get a chance to stop by the district office and meet these guys, they're great. We're just thrilled with the staff that we have at this point. So get a chance, go by and see them. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great night. Happy holidays.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you.